Thank you.
I'm all set, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for it. Just give me a heads up.
I got it.
It is.
Kleenex.
You are unmuted. You are muted.
I think I know where I left off with each photo, but do you know specifically which one you want to get through? This is pretty sure. This one goes on. Yeah, I think it was this one, and I want to go to this one, and I don't mind which way you get. Seconds is weird. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Diane, where's the best location for you for this? Is this like okay where I've had it? I don't want to be too loud. Oh, don't tell my family that. No, I'll look. My cross.
All right, everyone, please.
You are unmuted.
Judge, we're back on the record on 22-117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. I'll remind the witness you're still under oath.
All right, doctor. Thanks, Joe. All right, Mr. Alessi, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I have Exhibit 10 published, please? Thank you. Dr. Russell, what has been published on the TV screen is Exhibit 10. Do you recognize it?
Yes,
How do you recognize it?
because I've seen it before.
And please describe what it is.
So it is a hoodie, a picture of a hoodie sweatshirt with multiple defects in the arm area.
And have you assessed those multiple defects in the arm area?
Yes, I've looked at them carefully.
And please describe your assessment.
Well, there are multiple small holes in the fabric of the sweater in the arm. And I believe I said earlier 11, but it's a total of 11 for the whole shirt. So there are 9 holes here in the arm, and then in another section there's other holes.
Does what is depicted on Exhibit 10 constitute a pattern in your judgment?
Not specifically, no.
What, if any, conclusions do you draw from Exhibit 10 pertinent to your testimony here today?
Well, with that image, in conjunction with the picture of Mr. O'Keefe's right arm, my conclusion is that he was wearing that article of clothing when he was attacked.
And how do you reach that conclusion?
Well, again, the holes, the holes are rather small, which would correspond to holes created by a tooth, or in this case, maybe multiple teeth. And they are in the area of the arm, or the area of the body that corresponds with the wounds.
Have you ever in your career, either as an emergency room physician or a forensic pathologist, ever had to assess wounds in which the victim was wearing clothing?
Yes.
How many times would you estimate that you had to, or that you did make an assessment of wounds when the victim was wearing clothing?
Probably over 200 times because the clothing examination is part of the examination conducted by the forensic pathologist in the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office.
And did you, in fact, as a forensic pathology in Los Angeles, make assessments of wounds in forensic pathology with regard to a victim that was wearing clothing?
Yes.
Did you ever make that assessment in connection with dog-inflicted wounds of any kind?
No, I don't think so.
Are you familiar with whether, or strike that. Did Dr. Sporty Bello, in her her autopsy report, make any assessment of the clothing?
Yeah. So I'm sustaining it. You can ask her differently. You can ask it differently.
Okay. Dr. Russell, do you recall any discussion in the autopsy report of the assessment of the clothing that the decedent was wearing?
I don't recall.
if we showed you the autopsy report, would that assist you, potentially assist you, in your recollection?
Yes,
Do you have it with you still?
Is
I
that-
do.
Okay, go ahead, you can take a look at
Yeah,
it. Doctor.
thank you, Your Honor.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Let me see. Is there a particular location you'd like me to?
Your Honor, I am not able to answer that question because I can predict what the response may be. So I would
just-
like to,
Okay.
but I...
Go ahead and take
Okay.
a look at it. And if you can't answer the question, you can't answer the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, I do recall what she meant. She said that the body is clad with a pair of socks.
Right. Did she make any other assessment of clothing in the autopsy report, particularly with the arm of a hoodie? Take your time.
Since the report's in evidence, if you want to suggest a page, you can.
I might be suggesting a negative, Your Honor.
Okay.
I'll proceed with whatever way you do.
Is there any objection to just answering this question?
If
Okay.
he wants to lead on this question, I have no problem.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and suggest the answer to her.
Is it correct that the autopsy report does not contain any assessment of the clothing as being relevant to a nature and source of the wound of the deceased?
I reviewed the autopsy report very thoroughly, and I don't recall any description of this.
Thank you for the leeway, Mr. Brennan, and Your Honor. Now let's, if I could, Your Honor, publish Exhibit 11.
Okay?
Thank you. Do you recognize Exhibit 11?
Yes,
What is it?
it's the back portion of the same hoodie.
Same hoodie. Did you assess the back portion of the hoodie as depicted in Exhibit 11?
Just by the photograph.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you reach any conclusions with regard to Exhibit 11?
Nothing.
Was there anything relevant that you determined from Exhibit 11?
Not that I recall was significant.
And was Exhibit 11, in your judgment, necessary, assessment of it necessary to render the opinions and conclusions you have testified to here today?
Well, you should. I mean, the person should look at all the evidence, yes.
Right. And so after having looked at Exhibit 11, what is your conclusion as to whether it informs the question of the nature and source of the injuries?
It doesn't help.
With regard to Exhibit 12, Your Honor, if I may have
Okay.
that published. Do you recognize Exhibit 12?
Yes.
What is it?
So this is a close-up of one of the holes that is on the right sleeve of that hoodie, in the in the part that you can see from the anterior view.
The anterior view, but is it the anterior or posterior of the arm?
It could be it could be posterior because you only get it depends on how it's worn basically and how the material lies, way it's photographed. So I meant anterior view meaning the picture, the first picture we saw, which was the anterior view of the hoodie.
What assessment did you make, if
Well-
any, with regard to Exhibit 12?
Well, it's a small hole. It is consistent with a puncture created by a small object such as a canine tooth. And it appears that some of the fibers are actually pointed outward. Some of the clothing fibers are pointed outward from the wound, from the hole, rather, from the hole.
And did you draw any conclusions with regard to this exhibit?
This exhibit plus close-ups of some of the other similar holes with the fibers pointing out means whatever inflicted that hole also came out of the hole.
You say whatever inflicted that, did you reach a conclusion as to what inflicted that hole, or as you've referred to it as defects previously?
Yes, these are consistent with dog bites.
If we could publish, Your Honor, 13?
Okay.
Thank you. You recognize 13?
This image?
Yes.
Yes,
What is it?
similar to the other. It's just it's in a different location on the arm.
Did you make an assessment of what is depicted in Exhibit 13?
Yes,
What assessment did you make?
I believe this was inflicted by a dog tooth, a canine tooth, and again the fibers are pointing outward.
How did you make that assessment? How did you reach that conclusion?
Well, it's generally small and round. So, and the canine teeth are the teeth that stick out the most when a dog bites. So this is consistent with a canine bite.
Your Honor, may I have 14 published?
Yes.
Same. You recognize what is depicted on Exhibit 14?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a similar wound on the arm area of the hoodie, but this wound has hole, similar hole, except it's a little larger in one dimension, and given that cloth has some stretching capabilities, and there was movement between the victim and the dog, the stretch was caused by the tooth.
How did you determine there was some movement between the victim and the dog?
Because he was alive, and when these were inflicted, and it is normal behavior to move, and also just the configuration of the wounds we discussed earlier, there was some movement around the elbow area.
Your Honor, may I have 15 published?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 15, Dr. Russell?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
Well, how do I recognize it? Because the clothing pattern is very similar to all the others. I saw this previously. And again, it is a picture of the sleeve of the hoodie.
Which sleeve, right or left?
Right sleeve.
Please continue.
And it has a hole. This hole is longer than it is wide. And, but yet it still is consistent with a tooth entering through there.
And what conclusions, if any, did you draw from what is depicted in Exhibit 13?
That this was part of a dog bite.
And just so the record is clear, are all of these holes or defects, as you've referred to them as, in the hoodie, are they all on the right arm?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So let's go to, or excuse me, Your Honor, may I have published Exhibit 15?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
No, it's the same one.
May I have 16 published, Your Honor?
Yes.
Dr. Russell, do you recognize what's depicted as Exhibit 16?
Yes.
What is it?
So it's two holes. Generally,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you say there's 2 holes. Is there anything that is a marker on this picture that shows you that are 2 holes?
very good. Yes, there are 2 holes, one labeled number 3, one labeled number 4. They're in close proximity to one another. And number 3 is round, number 4 is a little irregular,
And,
but generally round.
Thank you. And what assessment, if any, did you make with regard to what is depicted in Exhibit 16?
I believe that this is consistent with 2 canine teeth penetrating the fabric,
How do you reach that conclusion?
because they're separate. Unfortunately, in that image, there's no ruler.
I'm sorry,
There's no ruler.
no rule.
No centimeters, a centimeter ruler in that particular image, but they're reasonably close by, so they could be. And
Could be,
inflicted by 2 canines
Thanks.
in the same bite.
yes, thanks. And what conclusions, if any, did you reach with what is depicted in this exhibit?
I think I just said it.
Good.
Yeah.
May I have published, Your Honor, 17?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recognize what is depicted in Exhibit 17?
In this exhibit,
Yes.
yes.
What is it?
Again, it's a close-up of the hoodie, the sleeve of the hoodie, and there's a defect in the fabric, and there's a label on it indicating it's number 4.
And did you assess Exhibit 17 before today?
Yes, I did.
What conclusions, if any, did you reach with regard to what's depicted in Exhibit 17?
I believe it's consistent with a puncture of the sweater.
And did you reach any conclusions with regard to the cause of the puncture?
Well, taken in totality with the other images, I believe that these are all the result of multiple dog bites.
Your Honor, may I have published 18?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recognize 18?
Yes,
What is it?
it's another defect in the sleeve of that article of clothing.
And if I could impose upon you, could you go back to 17, please? Your Honor, may I go back to 17
Yes.
quickly? Thank you. Do you know which arm of the hoodie this defect, as you call it, occurs in, right or left?
Right.
Your Honor, may I go now to 18?
Yes.
Thank you. Please continue with your assessment of what is depicted in 18.
It's another defect of the arm, of
In which
the
arm?
right arm of the hoodie. And it's generally circular in configuration. There seems to be fabric fibers exiting the wound.
And any further assessment you made with regard to what's depicted in Exhibit 18?
No. To the
Did you reach any conclusions as to the source of the whole defect, as you refer to it in, as what's depicted in Exhibit 18?
I believe it is from a tooth of the dog.
May I have, Your Honor, published 19?
Yes.
Thank you. You recognize, Dr. Russell, what's depicted in Exhibit 19?
Yes.
What is it?
So it's multiple defects in close proximity to one another. circular defects generally, but there's at least 1, 2, 3 in that image.
Did you make any further assessment of what is depicted in Exhibit 19?
I believe these are from the teeth of a dog.
Are you able to tell which teeth of the dog made those defects?
Not exactly.
How is it then you come to the conclusion it is from a dog's tooth when you say that you're not able to tell which tooth?
I didn't understand the question.
In your experience, are there times where you conclude that a wound is from a dog, but you don't know which specific tooth of the dog that caused it?
Yes.
And do you, okay, thank you. If we could, Your Honor, please publish 20.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 20?
Yes.
What is it?
Again, the a picture of the right arm of the hoodie.
And what is your assessment of what's depicted in Exhibit 20?
I see a small defect near, and it's labeled number 6.
And what is your conclusion as to the nature and source of the defect?
I don't really have a conclusion on this one.
Your Honor, could we please publish 21?
Yes.
Do you recognize Exhibit 21, Dr. Russell?
Yes.
What is it?
There are 2 defects in the right arm of the hoodie. And there's a ruler. They're about 3 centimeters away from one another.
Did you reach any conclusions with regard to what is depicted in Exhibit 21?
Yes,
What conclusions did you reach?
they're from a dog.
And how did you reach that conclusion?
Because they're consistent in appearance with a defect that would be caused by by canine teeth.
May I have published, Your Honor, 22?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Russell, do you recognize Exhibit 22?
Yes.
And did you make an assessment as to what is depicted in Exhibit 22?
Well, it's a photograph of the right arm of the hoodie with the number 7 label pointing to a particular area.
And what observations do you make, if any, from what's depicted in Exhibit 22?
On this particular projection, I can't really see the defect. So,
Your Honor, may I just quickly go back to Exhibit 20 and 21 for one
Okay.
question with each? Thank you. Which arm of the hoodie is depicted in Exhibit 20?
the right arm.
And if we could please, Your Honor, go to 21. Which arm of the hoodie is depicted in 21?
The right arm.
And if we could go to Exhibit 22. I think you answered, but I want the record clear. Are you able to tell which arm of the hoodie is depicted in Exhibit 22?
Well, yes, because I know that the only labels placed on this article of clothing were in the right arm area and the chest. And this contains a label, so this is the right arm area.
How do you know that? How do you know
Because
that the only labels were placed on the right arm?
Because we saw the overall picture.
May I have published, Your Honor, 23?
Yes.
You recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 23, Dr. Russell?
This one?
Yes, do you recognize that?
Yes.
What is it?
So it's it's a close-up picture of the right arm of the hoodie, and there's a number 7, and number 7 is pointing to a defect, small defect, several millimeters in length on that fabric.
How, if at all, does the ruler in these pictures contribute to your assessment of the defects in the clothing?
Well, they give an overall measurement of the wound of the holes, the defects, as they currently were when the photograph was taken. But we have to keep in mind that fabric stretches, and when it dries, it contracts. So that has to be kept in mind when making assessments. So the size right at the time that picture was taken could be different than when the injury was inflicted.
Does the ruler help you at all in this photograph or any of the photographs we've seen in determining whether or not a given defect is from a dog?
Yes, they do.
How?
Because there are several of them. The configuration of the collection of the defects are in a certain area, and actually it's an area that corresponds with the area of the decedent's arm where the injuries were. And they're significantly smaller than, for instance, what you would see in a gunshot wound.
Your Honor, may I please have published 24?
Sure.
Thank you. You recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 24, Dr. Russell?
Yes,
What is it?
that's another defect in the right arm, closer to the sleeve or cuff of the arm of that particular hoodie, and it's labeled number 8.
What assessment, if any, did you make of what's depicted in this exhibit?
It's consistent with the dog bite, and fabrics are pointed outward.
Why is it consistent with a dog bite?
Again, the size.
I'm sorry.
The size.
The size? The
Yeah.
size of the hole?
The size of the hole, yes, taken in conjunction with all of the rest of the holes.
All the rest of the holes in the other photos?
Yes, that we just discussed, yes.
Your Honor, may I have published 25?
Yes.
Thank you. You recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 25?
Yes.
What is it?
So it's again the right arm of the hoodie. It's down by the edge of the sleeve towards the wrist area would be. And it shows 2 defects, one of which is labeled 9, the other one I don't know the number, but it's labeled.
What conclusions, if any, did you reach with regard to what's depicted in Exhibit 25?
Dog bites.
How did you reach that conclusion?
Again, those holes are consistent with the other holes on the sleeve. They are present on the right side of the body. Now, I know, and one has to keep in mind that when someone is wearing an article of clothing, as the person moves, the clothing can move in relation to the arm. So even though that is the cuff area, we don't know exactly where it was on the arm when the bites were being inflicted. I don't know if that made sense.
It did to me.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I have published 26?
Sure.
Thank you. Dr. Russell, do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 26?
That appears to be a similar photograph to the prior one, just the exposure to be a little
The
me.
arm of the hoodie is depicted in Exhibit 26.
Right on.
Could we briefly go back, Your Honor, to Exhibit 25?
Yes.
Thank you. Which arm is depicted of the hoodie in Exhibit 25?
Right on.
Your Honor, could we go back to 26, please?
Yes.
Thank you. What assessment, if any, did you make of what's depicted in Exhibit 26?
That these were inflicted by the dog.
How did you make that assessment or conclusion?
Because they're similar in general appearance to the other ones on that right sleeve, and they're small in size.
And this is the right arm of the hoodie.
Correct.
Your Honor, may I have published 27?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Russell, do you recognize what is depicted in Exhibit 27?
Yes, I've seen that before.
What is it?
It's a defect in the chest area of the front of the hoodie.
What assessment, if any, did you make of the source and nature of what's depicted in that exhibit?
Yes, let me describe it a little bit better. It's labeled with number 10,
Yes.
and adjacent to it, of course, there's this big defect.
Can you use your, I'm sorry, Your Honor, may the witness use the laser pointer when she
Yes.
says this?
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. So this is the defect in question, labeled number 10. But adjacent to it, there's this huge defect right over here. It's going this way. And as being an emergency room physician, I recognize that as that large defect as having been caused by the emergency room personnel when they opened up the sweatshirt to have access to Mr. O'Keefe.
So, are you saying that there's two different sources of what's depicted in this exhibit, or is it just all from one source?
I believe that they're two different sources.
Can you, with your laser, identify each one and what your conclusion is as regards the nature of each one?
So this large one here, I believe, is from the scissor wound, the trauma scissors.
And trauma scissors of a medical professional in the emergency department?
Yes, or it could have been EMS personnel also. That's another
Understood.
possibility.
Please proceed to the next.
Yes, but then this other defect is different, and it's separated. There's actually solid tissue, fabric between the two defects. This is separate, and it appears to have a little bit of a tail-type configuration. So this could have been inflicted by the dog.
You say could. Is it could or is it consistent with the infliction by a dog?
It is consistent with, however, there were no chest.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's a competing noise out there
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Just trying to see if it was going to die down. Thank you.
There were no chest wounds caused by a dog in that area. So it could have been that the fabric was loose, and as the victim was pulling away from the dog's teeth caught it, but he didn't make contact, or didn't make contact with the skin. So I can't say for sure that this is a dog bite,
Right. So
a dog-related tear.
So, is it correct to say it's inconclusive whether this is from a dog, or is there no conclusion to be reached as to whether it's from a dog?
I don't know the difference.
Okay. I believe your answer is sufficient for the record. Thank you, Dr. Russell. If, Your Honor, we could please have published Exhibit 28.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 28?
I've seen this image before, yes.
What is it?
It's the front part of the hoodie, and there are two large defects. The one that's closer to the top of the image appears to be similar to one that would be made with trauma scissors by emergency personnel. The one that is below that, that's labeled number 11, I can't,
Stop your laser, because I just want to make sure I understand where you're pointing. You said below that. Can you just hold your laser as to where that is?
on the laser, you want to see what I'm,
If you could point, you said right below
this
that.
one, this, yeah. So this is, the top one is what I believe is caused by traumacysts.
Yes.
Below that in this image, and labeled number 11,
Yes.
is a very irregular defect. That's this one right here. And it's labeled number 11. I can't say for sure what caused it.
What causes you to use the parlance irregular? What is irregular about it?
Well, irregular means that it's not a straight line, it's not a nice circle, it doesn't have a nice edge to it.
Are you able to reach any conclusions with regard to what is depicted in Exhibit 29?
No.
Your Honor, if I could have published Exhibit 30.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think they were referring to 28.
Yeah, I think that last one was
I'm
28
sorry.
and 27 before then. I just thought I might have missed it, so.
No, you didn't. I did. That was my error. Thank
So
you, Mr.
29.
Brennan. I believe we are now on 29. I have, it appears 29 is up, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Russell, do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 29?
Yes.
What is it?
It's an area of the front of the hoodie that is in the front, the anterior of the hoodie, and has two labels showing two different defects, 12 and 13.
What assessment, if any, did you make with regard to what is associated with number 12?
Number 12 is a long defect, and by itself, I can't make any assessment.
Can you
But-
make it? I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, but next to, adjacent to number 13, which is another defect that's much smaller, the two of them in combination are suggestive of teeth marks.
Can you put your laser up and down? You said 2. I think I understand.
Yeah,
what
so
we-
num-
there's 1,
Yes,
and then where's 2?
right here.
Understood.
Yeah.
And why do you believe it's suggestive of dog tooth marks?
Well, dogs have multiple teeth, and so multiple teeth can cause individual defects, and the fact that there are two defects in close proximity to one another and oriented in the same direction makes me consider that it's possible that they were caused by teeth.
And are you able to determine a more specific location of where this is on the hoodie?
I might be wrong. I think it's the... I think it, no, I can't really say for sure because I don't know if this picture is upside down or not. But
So the nature of the picture
Yeah.
does not allow you to make a conclusion that you're comfortable with regard to the location on the hoodie?
yeah, individually.
Objection sustained to the form.
Understood. Are you able to reach a conclusion with regard to what part of the hoodie is depicted with reference to the 12 and 13 on this exhibit?
Not from this image only.
In combination with any other image, are you able to reach a conclusion as to what part of the hoodie is depicted by 12 and 13?
If we went back to the overall picture, I could try.
Do we need this answer from her?
We do not, Your Honor.
Okay,
I was actually going to the next one. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Your Honor, may I have published 30?
Yes.
Thank you. You recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 30?
So this is a close-up of the previous picture of the anterior portion of the hoodie
Previous picture meaning Exhibit 29, the one we were just looking at?
Yes.
Thank you. And how can you determine that from what's depicted in Exhibit 30?
Well, because there are two defects that are close together. They're labeled 12 and 13, and unfortunately, the ruler covers one part of one of them, but still, I can see enough of it.
And what's your assessment of what's depicted in Exhibit 30?
They are consistent with being caused by a dog teeth, by dog teeth.
How do you reach that conclusion?
Well, because they're oriented in the same direction and they're close by.
What do you mean by they're with the laser, what do you mean they're oriented in the same direction?
So they're going, this 12 is going up and down in this image, and so is 13.
And why is that notable to you in reaching your conclusion?
Well, the teeth, causing a defect, would tear along the same plane, the same, they'd make tears in parallel. That's same direction.
Any other assessment you make of what's depicted in 30?
No.
Your Honor, may we publish 32?
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 32?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a wound, a partially healed avulsion wound of a person's hand between the thumb and the index finger.
Do you have knowledge of whose hand that is that's depicted in Exhibit 32?
I do.
What is the person, do you know the name of the person's hand who's depicted in Exhibit 32?
I think it was Lisa, not Lisa.
Do you have knowledge of how that wound occurred?
Yes,
How do you have knowledge of how that wound occurred?
because I read a report regarding a dog bite incident.
And what did you learn from reading that report about what is depicted in Exhibit 32?
That a dog named Chloe attacked another dog, and in the process, the woman whose hand that was bitten by Chloe.
Can you describe what is shown with regard to Exhibit 32 in relation to dog Chloe?
Well, this is a partially healed avulsion laceration.
From your experience, have you seen these types of avulsion wounds either as an emergency room physician and or a pathologist in your 30-plus years of practice?
I've seen them not infrequently in the emergency room.
Did you say not infrequently?
That's correct.
Is that another way of saying you've seen it frequently?
I've seen them many times in the emergency department.
Is this a wound of someone who is antemortem or postmortem, or are they alive?
This person's alive. This is an ante-mortem wound, and it shows many, many days of healing, maybe even much longer.
How can you tell that what is depicted in that exhibit, that wound, has, as you described it, many, many days of healing?
That might take years of medical school to explain, but there's the edges. First of all, it's not bleeding. Second of all, there's what we call granulation tissue in the wound.
What is that granulation?
Well, that's tissue that the body builds up. Oh, yes. So first of all, this most likely did not appear like this when it was first inflicted. What happened was the flap, there's a flap here, that skin was over here to begin with. But then what happened is that it became detached, and that's called an avulsion wound, where a piece of skin is detached, but not completely. So it still remained intact down here. Now, that area in between, so that, of course, skin contracts as it dries, and that area between here and there heals. The body heals itself, tries to close itself off. So it builds up this, what is called granulation tissue, which is basically new tissue, to cover the defect so that infection doesn't set in. And that takes weeks, usually.
What is it that takes weeks?
That healing, that extent of healing.
Right. And so is that wound the same as when it was initially made, or is it different from when the wound was initially made?
Very different.
How is it very different from when the wound was initially made?
When it was initially made, this edge here would be sharper. Right now you can see there's rolled up tissue here, what appears to be rolled, and that's because it's healing. So this would have been sharper, and the tissue down in here would have been bleeding, or it would have had a crust if the bleeding dried.
Are you able, from this Exhibit 30, to give a range of when this wound was first made in terms of days or weeks?
Well, I think I did already. I think that it was at least weeks.
At least weeks? Alrighty, thank you. We can remove that, thank you very much. Dr. Russell, today you have given various assessments and opinions. Have those assessments and opinions been based upon, among other things, your 30-plus years as an emergency medicine physician?
Yes.
And with regard to the same assessments and opinions, have those been based on your 30-plus years as a forensic pathologist?
Yes.
What I want to now move to, and I'm almost at the conclusion of my questioning for this point, do you recall testifying previously in the first trial with regard to rendering an opinion on whether the source of the wounds in Mr. O'Keefe's arm were caused by a dog or a large animal?
Yes.
And do you recall what your answer generally was in respect to a question of were those wounds consistent with a dog or animal bite?
Yes.
And do you recall what your answer was?
Generally, yes.
And generally, what was your answer to the question of whether the wounds were consistent with a dog or large animal?
Your Honor, may there be a reference with prior testimony? I have no idea what specifically we're referring to as far as the past opinion.
Transcript, date, where it is.
Happy to give it, Your Honor. May I have a moment to give it?
Yes.
Well, we have a moment. I'd also add, you can understand if this is impeachment, inappropriate attempt, a prior consistent statement. This would be some foundation.
So for what purpose are you offering this?
Your Honor, I would first like to respond to this preliminary hearing where, as you know, the rules of
of evidence are not strictly, the purpose I'm giving this, Your Honor, is not for impeachment. It's exactly for her to state, and if you would allow, Honor would allow me to connect up with the questions, it will allow her to state, with regard to her testimony today, whether or not the opinion she has formed previously is the same opinion as has formed, is it the same?
Okay, so why don't you ask her what her opinion is today?
Yes.
And then just ask her whether it was any different than before. You can pull the page up if you have it. I have it here, I think, so just...
You don't need it?
So do you need it, Mr. Brennan?
Please.
I'm happy to provide it, Mr. Brennan. It is the June 21st transcript. Let me just double check on that. Yeah, right here. Your Honor, I don't want to take up the court's time. If I could, at the end.
Sure, I think co-counsel should be able to find it for you. So why don't you come on in and just ask her the question, and I'm sure Ms. Giannetti can pull it up.
Thank you, Your Honor. Apologize to the court for that. Dr. Russell, are the opinions that you have given today consistent or inconsistent with the opinions? Well, let me ask it this way. For the opinions that you have given today, how do they compare to the opinions that you've given previously?
I'm not oblivious to the attempt yet. I object. It's not the proper form of questioning to go back and try to explain potentially inconsistent statements in today's testimony.
Is that what you're attempting to do?
No, Your Honor. It's not what I'm
All right,
attempting.
so the opinions today, and I guess it's a matter of argument, right? I can be told with the previous, it was attached to the motion that's before me today, the transcript was attached, can see what her previous opinion is, and then I ultimately decide whether it's consistent or not. Right?
I agree with that, Your Honor.
Okay, so if you've got a site, I'm happy to look at the page to see if I might be able to figure out where you're going, or you can come to sidebar and
Can I come to
explain it,
sidebar
sure.
with it, Your Honor?
I may have a moment, Your Honor, I'm going to see if I have in fact concluded the questions for
Okay,
this moment.
sure.
Thank you.
Jim, can you give me those?
Your Honor, if I may have a point of order question with the court?
I'm sorry?
May I have a point of order question with the
Sure.
court? Thank you. As you know, she has prepared a report, and different jurisdictions do it different in Daubert hearings. Is that something you believe needs to be marked? I was just going to do a brief foundation that she has in fact prepared one. Sometimes courts require...
Is there an objection to me receiving a report and evidence?
If the court would find it helpful, I won't object, but I do not believe it's admissible and relevant. But if the court would like to reference it, I won't object.
So why don't we mark it for identification, and then the two of you talk about it. We'll see how the hearing goes, and if there is, I may well want to see it, but we'll mark it for identification, Mr. Alessi, and then later see if it comes in, okay? We're clearly, I think, going to have to come back another day, so we'll have some time.
Yes. A for identification.
That's what I want. Thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
Thank you. There, Jim, thank you. Jim.
Do you need it? Yeah. Sure.
Yes.
I am handing you, Dr. Russell, what has been marked as Exhibit A for identification. Unlike the other exhibits, it is not evidence. Not yet. Do you recognize Exhibit A?
Yes,
What is it?
it's the report that I wrote.
How many pages is that report?
Sorry.
Are they not numbered?
They are numbered, I just, the CV is attached as well. Okay, it's 11 pages.
Dr. Russell, did you prepare that report?
I did.
Your Honor, I just would like, if I could please note for the record that that report was filed and it's on file with the court as part of our opposition motion. I know Your Honor knows it, but I would just like to note that for the record.
Sure.
Thank you. At this particular point, Your Honor, I have no questions, and I appreciate the court's patience and gracious allocation of time for me to go through these questions with the witness.
All right, thank you very much. So I intend for us to go until 4 o'clock today, so we'll see how far you get, Mr. Brennan, okay?
Thank you. May I?
Please.
I just want to look. Sure.
You all set?
I'm all set, Mr. President. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon.
My name's Hank Brennan. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting before.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brennan.
I'm going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Yes,
Thank you. You shared with us that you have an extensive history of experience in the emergency room.
yes,
And in the emergency room, you see all types of injuries, don't you?
yes,
You see physical injuries, yes?
Yes.
Emotional injuries,
yes,
people who overdose, perhaps they're drunk on drugs,
yes,
alcohol.
yes,
So you cover a wide array of different types of treatments.
Yes,
Now, you must have seen a number of broken bones when you were in the emergency room caring for different patients, correct?
thousands.
Arms, legs, toes.
Yes.
In light of your extensive experience in the emergency room, and looking at all of these broken bones, that doesn't make you an expert in orthopedics, does it?
Emergency orthopedics, yes.
Oh. Have you ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No, I've never.
Isn't orthopedics a specialty in medicine where there is specific training?
Yes,
And people who become orthopedics or orthopedic surgeons, they go through rigorous education specifically to be an orthopedic, right?
well, orthopedics involves more than just setting fractures or diagnosing fractures. Orthopedics involves things like bone tumors, bone cancers, a lot of other parts of orthopedics, not just trauma. I am an expert in emergency orthopedics, I believe.
So you have decided that you are an expert in orthopedics?
Emergency orthopedics.
Emergency orthopedics, is that a specialty that you get a fellowship in, or somehow you are deemed an expert in any way?
It's not a specialty that has a fellowship that I'm aware of.
I see. So you are proclaiming that you yourself think that you're an emergency room orthopedic.
I have expertise in emergency orthopedics, yes.
Are you an expert in orthopedics?
The whole field of orthopedics, no.
And you don't have any specialized degrees in orthopedics, do you?
No.
You would agree that somebody who's gone through the rigorous requirements of being an orthopedic and qualified, they'd have much more experience in that than you. True?
In general orthopedics, yes. I have a lot of experience in orthopedic trauma related to emergencies.
Have you ever been in any court where you've ever been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
It was never an issue.
But I'm asking you, have you ever been in any court, state, federal, this country, any other country, where you've been qualified as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Has anybody other than yourself ordained you as an expert in orthopedics?
I haven't ordained myself as an expert in orthopedics. I have a lot of knowledge and expertise in emergency orthopedics.
Has any authority ever recognized you and qualified you as an expert in orthopedics?
No.
Just you.
I haven't declared myself an expert in orthopedics. I have expertise.
You've seen a lot of car accidents you shared with us
Yes.
as a police officer
Yes.
in the emergency room.
Yes.
Perhaps when you were at the ME's office, you saw the consequence of car accidents.
I
correct?
did. Yes.
Are you an expert in accident reconstruction?
Reconstruction? No.
And when you see the different people that come in with overdoses, whether it's alcohol or drugs, you treat them, don't you?
Yes.
But you're not an expert toxicologist, are you?
I'm not a toxicologist, no. But toxicology is a part of emergency medicine. So we have training in orthopedic, in toxicology, but no, I am not an expert in toxicology.
I'm not suggesting you're unfamiliar with it or you haven't had experience or some training. I'm asking you if you think you're an expert.
In toxicology?
Yes.
No.
And you've shared with us that you agree you don't have any expertise in DNA.
That's correct.
In fact, you know very little about DNA, don't you?
I would say that's pretty reasonable, yes.
That's what you said.
Yes.
Oh. You mentioned that you are generalizing or approximating the number of dog bite cases you've attended to in the emergency room relative to civilian dogs or domestic dogs. Is that right?
Yes.
And you've suggested that you probably treated about one dog a week over a period of 27 years. Yes? Which
Yes.
is 1,000 weeks in your estimation.
Yes.
You worked for some of the most busiest ERs. Was there a lot of patients every day that you treated?
Yes.
On average, how many patients would you treat in the ER over those 27 years on a daily basis?
Daily, I would think about 30.
So if you're treating 30 patients a day over a course of a week, and you consider that in the context of 1,000 weeks, the amount of dog bite cases that you treated in the ER is about half of 1%. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
No, you lost me on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, if you had one dog bite case a week, and say you had 20 cases a day, 100 a week, that would be 1% of your cases.
Oh, it could, yes, yes, but it's the number of cases, not the percentage that was asked of me.
I'm just asking you a question.
Okay, I just want to clarify that.
And so you said how many, 25, 30 a day?
Patients, yes.
So that's less than 1% of the cases that you treated in the ER relative to dog bites.
Okay, that's reasonable, and that's average, actually.
Now, when you treated cases of dog bites in the ER, you said that you would sometimes have the reporter, the person injured or somebody with them, tell you it was a dog bite.
Yes.
Yes? And sometimes you had communication difficulties, or there was a reason why they couldn't share it with you.
Yes.
And then you suggested that's how you came to this pattern recognition skill, is that you would have to determine the injury with no help from the reporter.
I was always interested in dog bites, and yes, there were a few occasions when I had to use those skills in order to determine what kind of an animal it
Let's
was.
talk about those few occasions. Why don't you share with us a story where you met a patient, that you can recall, where you had no idea what the injury may have been because there was no ability to communicate, and tell us about how you determined it was a dog.
Well, thinking about a specific case, I can think of cases where I determined it wasn't a dog bite, and it was something else based on the pattern of the bite. And am I not answering your question?
I'm not looking for cases where you couldn't determine if a dog bite. I want you to share some of this wealth of experience you have in dog bites, and share with us, if you will, one of the cases where there was no information that it was a dog bite for whatever reason, and then you, based on your pattern recognition skills, determined that it was a dog bite. I want you to walk through an actual case that you can recall that you had with this scenario you presented now.
I can't give you a specific case because, again, in the overall scheme of emergency medicine and the frequency that dog bites are to other cases, it's just not a case that I would remember, that kind of the specifics of the case.
It's interesting in supporting your vast experience you shared with us, these sides or these past experiences, and presenting yourself as an expert in pattern recognition. And it's interesting that when I'm asking for these details to support this general you can't remember.
Objection, Your Honor. Argument.
Yeah, so, counsel,
sorry. Yes.
that's okay. In Massachusetts, typically, we don't give the reason for objections from the floor. Your objection sustained. No commentary, Mr. Brennan.
You shared with the court that you wrote a few articles that had to do with dog bites.
Co-authored, yes.
Can I ask you some questions about those?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Now, the first one I want to talk about is law enforcement canine dog bites. Do you remember that article?
Yes.
And that had to do with what you refer to as law enforcement dogs or canines.
Yes.
In that article, you talk specifically about a technique that you believe law enforcement or canine dogs utilize, which is bite and hold.
Yes.
And what you have suggested is that the bite and hold technique is different than typically a domestic dog or a civilian dog,
Yes.
because it's a trained learning for the dog, correct?
Yes.
There are certain injuries you would expect from a canine dog using a bite and hold technique.
Yes.
When you wrote this, or co-authored this article, you didn't actually sit down with people who had wounds and compare the wounds to the dog that caused them, did you?
To the actual dog?
Yes.
I didn't, but I didn't.
Just want to know if you did.
No.
Okay. And when you looked at these different cases, there was 700 cases. This was what you called or the authors called a retrospective analysis.
Correct.
That means you were looking back at old files.
Yes, but I participated in some of those files. We were just looking back at the data from those files. I participated in the care of some of those patients.
I understand.
Okay.
And so when you went through the files, you didn't have the opportunity then to follow up and speak to any of the participants or the injured victims, did you?
I spoke to many of the victims while I was treating them.
When you decided to write this article, did you go back and speak to anybody?
No.
There's no mention in this article about pattern recognition in any way. That's not what this article was about, was it?
No, that's not what the article's about.
It was about something entirely different than what you've suggested today as your pattern recognition skills. Yes?
That's correct. I recognized the patterns because I saw the wounds and I saw the injuries and I saw them over and over and over again. And I recognized those patterns throughout my career. And so it's hard to unrecognize something.
I'm trying to ask you about the significance of your study because
Okay.
this is actually something that you published.
Yes.
And I'm trying to determine, or I want you to be able to discuss the relevancy of this article to what you're testifying today. So the question, the really narrow question I have for you is, in this study, it had nothing to do with trying to engage in pattern recognition.
The purpose of the study was not to teach people pattern recognition. It was to alert them to the dangers of this different type of dog bite so that they weren't undertreating them. But in the process of seeing all those patients, I developed the pattern recognition.
Okay. And so there was another article, Managing Law Enforcement Canine Dog Bites in the Emergency Department.
Yes.
Now that only comprised of 4 cases, yes?
It was a case description.
Of 4 cases.
Yes.
And do you know most studies usually include over 30 cases?
It's not a study.
I see. You reviewed types of injuries relative to civilian or domestic dogs, or just canine?
Those were canine dogs.
And again, your position is that the injuries by canine dogs, law enforcement dogs, are different in kind than domestic or civilian dogs.
In general, when they bite and hold, those injuries are different. Sometimes they don't get a complete bite.
And so this article didn't deal with civilian or domestic dogs, it dealt with only canine dogs.
That's correct.
Exclusively on the idea or the perspective of bite and hold injuries.
It was on the perspective of you need to learn how to treat these
Bite and hold injuries.
dog bite injuries.
Bite and hold.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Now, again, in this article, there was no effort to identify wounds or use pattern analysis. It was the treatment of bite and hold injuries from canines,
That's correct.
law enforcement canines. Yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then you also shared with us, in addition to these 2 articles on law enforcement dogs and bite and hold injuries, that you did some revising, editing of a book for a Dr. Is it Vati?
I'm sorry, say again?
You said that you revised or edited a book of a
Dr.
friend.
Vail.
Dr. Vail, I'm sorry, Dr. Vail. And when you were asked about what actually you recall about the topics, you don't really remember the topics of that book, you just remembered you edited it?
No, I remember the topics of the
Okay.
book.
In the topics of the book, it was dealing with human teeth, wasn't it?
Yes, but in the article itself, if you read it, there's mention about dog dentition.
There's a mention of it.
Yes.
Tell us what that mention was.
Well, the mention is that the dog dentition looks different and dog bites look different because of the triangular shape of the dog's mouth versus a rounded shape of the human's mouth.
Well, when they talk about the shape of a dog's mouth, it's not really triangular, it's like an hourglass.
Well, but that was the quote. Those were the words that were used in the article, and it's relative triangular shape. It's as opposed to a round shape of a human.
Well, in most studies, professional studies by experts, isn't it routinely referred to as an hourglass shape?
I haven't seen that at all.
Well, have you read books on dog bites?
I've read articles on dog bites.
Have you read books on dog bites?
No, I have read articles on dog bites.
Have you ever read this book? Do you recognize this as an authority?
No.
No?
So for the record, you need to say what you just showed the
I'm
witness.
showing Dr. Russell a book called Dog Bites, a Multidisciplinary Perspective, edited by Daniel S. Mills. Never,
Is that it? I'm sorry. May I see it?
if the court would let me, of course. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It doesn't mention if any of these people have degrees of
I'm
any.
sorry, Your Honor, I don't believe a question's pending.
Sorry, Mr. Alessi, I couldn't hear you.
Thank you. I don't believe a question
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
pending for the witness.
Okay, are you moving to strike that?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll strike that. So, Doctor, I know it's been a long day. Wait for a question, please, okay?
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
You done reviewing the book?
Yes.
You've, through your testimony, attempted to or suggested there's a distinction between canine law enforcement wounds and that of domestic.
Yes,
But domestic dogs can cut the skin,
correct.
cause serious injury,
Yes,
deep wounds.
they can.
It's not just that domestic dogs just nip around the corners. They can bite,
They can.
they can attack,
Yes,
they can kill.
yes,
You've seen it firsthand.
yes. Oh, I didn't witness the attack, no.
Do you doubt that it was a canine attack?
No, I didn't witness the attack myself.
Oh, I understand.
Firsthand is what you said.
Okay. You made a firsthand observation of a dog bite in the 1970s when you were at a training,
Yes,
and one of the participants was bit.
yes.
Now, you said you didn't remember the wound. Do you have any memory of looking at what happened after a dog actually bit somebody firsthand?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I'm going to allow its cross-examination on our based on our testimony.
Say again? Any question?
Should I repeat, Doctor?
Yes, please.
Do you have any memory of what you saw of when a dog actually bit somebody, your firsthand observation?
From 50 years ago? No.
Right. When people came in the emergency room, you didn't actually see the bites or how the mechanics of it happening. You're treating it after they come and ask you for aid.
That's correct.
Did you ever, in any of those emergency room experiences, go and see the dog?
No.
Did you ever have any other information about the dog, photographs, pictures, anything like that?
Well, I did have other information about the dog.
Oh, give me an example. Tell me.
Well, we had to fill out a dog bite report after a dog bite's requirement in Los Angeles County. So, although most doctors don't have the time to do it, I tried to comply with that rule. So I would question the victim, try to find out the address of the dog if they knew it. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But I tried to get as much information as I could.
Did you ever get any photographs?
No.
From? So it was just reporter information from the person who's coming for treatment or somebody that was assisting them?
Yes.
Okay. You provided a CV in this case, didn't you?
Yes.
In your CV, you list out some of your pertinent history and experience.
Yes.
Subsequent to your CV, you wrote a report and you signed it on the 9th of December, 2024.
Yes.
And it was provided to the Commonwealth, on December 10th, 2024, 2 days ago.
Yes.
There were a number of things that you offered in that report regarding your suggested experience that are just not in your CV. Isn't that fair to say?
That could be, yes. Of course, you can't put everything in the CV.
Well, you didn't say anything really about dog bite experience in your CV other than your 2 articles, did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And you didn't mention anything about this specialized training or expertise in pattern recognition analysis. You didn't mention anything about that in your CV, did you?
Can't mention everything.
I didn't ask if you could mention anything. I'm asking if
Okay.
you mentioned that.
Well, it says brief CB on the top.
Okay. I'll ask you again.
Okay.
Did you mention anything in your CV about pattern recognition analysis in your described expertise in that?
No.
In your report, and let me ask you before we get to your report, you testified at a voir dire in this case
Yes.
about a year ago,
Less than that.
and you then testified at trial.
Yes.
When you testified in the voir dire and trial, and in your CV, you don't mention the scores of peer review articles on dog bites that you studied, do you?
Ask that question.
I'm
again.
sorry. When you testified 2 times before,
Yes.
did you talk about the scores, as you describe it, of peer review articles that you've studied on dog bites?
On the numbers of period. No, I didn't mention that. That's correct.
Okay, and that's not mentioned in your CV either,
You don't usually mention it in your CV about the articles you read.
but I'm asking if you did.
Oh, no, I wouldn't mention that in my CV.
Okay, so let's talk about it now since you didn't mention it. You read scores of peer-reviewed articles on dog bites.
Throughout my career, yes.
Let's talk about the peer-reviewed articles that you've studied on pattern recognition analysis of dog bites. Could you please give me a list of those peer-reviewed articles that you studied?
I don't think there are any.
Well, you
There
said-
are some mentions of pattern recognition in some articles. However, I don't think there's a dedicated article on pattern recognition of
Well,
dog bites.
you said in your report that you reviewed scores of peer-reviewed articles on dog bites.
Dog bites, yes.
Okay, so those didn't really include pattern recognition as you've described your expertise today.
Some of them did, some of them didn't, but that might have not have been the major focus of the article.
Which ones did? Can you reference us the ones that you've read and relied upon, in your opinion today, that have to do with pattern recognition analysis?
May I look at my report or my CV?
Sure.
Of course.
Sure. Go ahead and take your time, Doctor.
Thank you. Okay, there is, and they might not have used the term pattern recognition, but that's what they're talking about in these articles.
Okay.
There is a article by D. Muniak. It's actually listed in my report under literature.
Okay, I see it.
It's the third one. Yes.
And that deals with pattern recognition analysis?
It's part of the article. There was a lot more in the article than just pattern recognition. And again, they might not have used that specific term pattern, but it's what the subject was discussed in the middle of the article, yes.
What was discussed in this article that you relied upon?
Oh, I relied on the descriptions of wounds. I relied on a lot of this article.
Well, share with us in detail. Could you tell us what you relied on in that article as part of your opinion?
There was a description. There was an area that described wounds and fatal wounds in dog bites, and how to approach them. You know, how to investigate them. There was an area that described what some of these wounds looked like. And there was actually an area that I believe it was this article that said that if you have this plus this plus this, that it is pathognomonic for a dog bite. Now, I believe that was the article that said that. One of these articles did, but anyways, so yeah. So I think maybe you might want to look at them.
Oh, I did.
Okay.
That's why I'm asking you.
Okay.
That's why I'm confused about which one you're talking about.
There was not a recipe book that said, okay, you know, this is the pattern of a dog bite. It might, you know, they might not get a lot of readers for that, but this was a forensic approach as to how to identify fatal dog attacks.
So from your resume, Doctor, could you tell me which article you're talking about?
I'm talking about the third one down.
What's the title?
The title of the article is Forensic Approach of Fatal Dog Attacks, a Case Report and Literature Review.
Okay.
Fatal dog attacks oftentimes involve vulnerable areas like the neck,
Absolutely.
abdomen.
Neck, face, head, yes.
That's-
Sometimes the abdomen, yes.
Okay. No cases cited in there that deal with wounds on an arm.
Because it's a fatal...
Right.
Right. But that doesn't mean that there weren't wounds on the arm. It's that the fatal wounds, like in the case I autopsied, the fatal wounds generally were in the areas that had organs that that could be damaged, like or major vessels like a carotid artery, neck. But there could be a lot of other wounds. For instance, in my case, there was probably about 60 wounds.
I understand.
Okay, but some, you're not going to talk about every single one of them because they're not worthy of describing.
Okay. You said that you attended multiple seminars, talks, and lectures regarding wound identification.
Yes.
Okay. When did you attend seminars on wound identification?
Intermittently throughout my career, I can't give you any dates.
Okay. Were any of those wound identifications dog bite wound identification seminars?
No, they were general wound identifications, and they may mention bites.
Okay. Was there any of these seminars that focused on dog bite wounds?
That focused on dog bite wounds?
Yes.
No.
How about the talks you went to? Any of the talks focus on dog bite wounds?
There were several talks that focused on bite wounds.
I'm going to ask again. Were there any talks that focused on dog bite wounds?
No.
Lectures. You've cited that you've attended lectures as part of this experience. Can you recall specific lectures that focused on dog bite wounds?
Not entire lectures. There were lectures in emergency department, training sessions, but dog bites were usually mixed in with other kind of animal bites, and discussion would occur because it's not you have to use up an hour usually when you go to one of these lectures, and there were other animals to talk about besides dogs.
In these lectures that you went to that didn't focus primarily on dog bite wounds, did they talk about pattern recognition analysis of dog bite wounds?
Generally not the emergency medicine ones, because that's actually not really a major focus. The focus in emergency medicine is treatment. I'm a bit unusual because I have this interest that I've had for many years.
So it's fair to say none of the multiple seminars, talks, lectures that you attended had any focus on pattern recognition analysis of dog bite wounds?
None of them had any focus. That's correct.
Okay. You've shared with us your experience. You've agreed that you are not an accident reconstruction expert, correct?
Correct.
Are you an expert on self-defense? So when you give opinions about self-defense, I know you have experience and you have observations of what you believe are defensive wounds, but do you have any actual experience as a self-defense expert?
No.
Do you have any specialized training, certificates, degrees in self-defense?
No.
Self-defense wounds?
No.
When you went to these lectures, talks, seminars, group meetings, do you have any memory of particular trainings that you had on self-defense wounds?
You mean defense wounds?
Sure, defense wounds.
Yes, I do. I have particular memories of those types of lectures.
Okay.
In topic. Oh, yes, I do.
Well, let's talk about a few of them. What was one of the lectures that you went to that was directed at defense wounds?
Well, not only did I go to some of these lectures, but I gave some of these lectures.
Okay.
And they were child abuse, elder abuse, domestic violence lectures. And in the coroner's office, again, mechanism of injury is stressed, and there's a whole training program.
You have no degree in biomechanics.
No.
Okay. And so when I asked you about one of the trainings on defense wounds, I want you to just give us a little detail from your memory about the training. Share with us how you've come to this knowledge on defense wounds.
Again, okay. So in the clinical setting, I was taught many times, and then I subsequently taught students about how victims of a violent act will instinctively bring up their arms to protect themselves from whatever is being inflicted, whether it be knife wounds or blunt wounds from an object. whatever is being inflicted on them, they will tend, without thinking, to try to. I think it's common sense, by the way.
So on the outside of the arm, if there's marks, that could be a defensive wound?
Yes.
Could it be a different type of wound, not a defensive wound, but a wound where somebody punches or hits and it hits a metal or a stationary or a fixed object?
Could those kind of wounds
Sure.
end up there? Oh, yes.
Okay. So just because there is a wound on the posterior side of a forearm, that does not make it a defensive wound, does it?
Not absolutely.
Well,
In context, though.
right. So you need to know more information.
Correct.
So perhaps if you saw how that happened, that would provide you more information.
That would be one way.
But if you saw nothing and have really no idea how it happened, it doesn't give you a lot of context of the wound other than it's a wound on the posterior side of an arm.
Well, it does in the sense that it's a common way that people protect themselves.
Can someone incur wounds to the forearm, posterior side of the forearm, if they fall to the ground and fall backwards?
They could, but they wouldn't look like that.
Well-
That series. Okay.
Have you studied over the ground?
I've seen hundreds of people that have fallen backwards or frontwards and every which way.
Wouldn't you want to have an idea what they fell on or into before you make a conclusion that it would not have looked like the picture that we've looked at, Exhibit 5?
I've seen, as I said, hundreds, and there has never been a pattern like that ever that I've seen.
Well, when someone hits a moving or a floating object, patterns are dynamic. They change all the time, don't they?
They do during the hitting process. Yes, during that process.
Okay. You talked about your specialized training. You said you had a program in motor vehicle accidents.
Yes.
And I think when you testified before, Attorney Lally had asked you whether or not your training was, I think he used the word rudimentary, and you agreed?
Yes, I believe it was only a one-week course or something thereabouts.
When you're identifying a wound at the hospital, is it important to know, you said it's important to know the animal because that dictates the treatment.
It may dictate the treatment.
What if you can't identify the animal?
Then then you have to go on clinical judgment, and sometimes we even have to call up the Board of Health. But you go on clinical judgment to determine, well, what was the worst possibility? That's the way I approach medicine. What is the worst? Could it have been a rabid animal, an animal with rabies? Or was it an animal that doesn't carry rabies? And then based by treatment on that, sometimes you have to treat broadly, and sometimes you have to, treat people for conditions, even if you don't know 100% that they exist.
Are there times when you saw injuries that you just didn't know how they happened?
Yes.
Many times. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And many times you thought what you saw were bites, but you couldn't articulate the animal, right?
That happens sometimes.
Okay. Suffice to say, you have never, ever been qualified in a federal court to testify as a dog bite expert, have you?
No.
And other than this trial a year ago, have you ever been qualified to testify in any state court in the entire country as a dog bite expert?
No, the issue never came up.
That's not what I asked,
Okay.
though.
No.
No. You wrote a report in this case?
Yes.
Did anybody help you write this report?
I wrote the report. I had some help with some minor edits and rearranging, some paragraphs or whatever, but putting things in the right category.
Okay.
But no, I wrote the report.
Who helped you with your report?
Mr. Alessi?
So did you write a preliminary or draft report, send it for input, and then change it?
No, I didn't change it. I wrote the report, and I would have things in the wrong categories, for instance, like training experience or whatever.
Who said they were the wrong category?
Well, I think that was my conclusion, actually.
I see. And so how would you go through this editing process? How did that work on this report? Would you send it back and forth?
It got sent back and forth a couple times.
Okay. Now, this report you signed, right?
Did I sign it? Yes.
Nobody else signed it. You.
I wrote it.
Okay. And the reason why I asked if you had help, a lot of your statements and conclusions in this report are different than the testimony that you did hearing a year ago and at the trial. Is that fair to say?
I don't think it's fair to say.
Okay.
I think that
Tell me.
I don't think it's fair.
Okay.
I was convinced, if we would get into specifics, I was convinced of of my opinion back in the voir dire and in the trial. But I think I stated it wrong. I stated it as if I was talking to other doctors. You know, they say in medicine that nothing is 100% in medicine. That's what we learn, you know, when we go up through medical school and residency and whatever. And in my teachings, I always told people nothing is 100%. And that was the number that I was, you know, that I thought I was being asked for, basically. It was 100%. So that's why I stated my opinion the way I did. But anyways, as I went through material again, I was convinced back then, and I am still convinced right now, that these are caused by dog bites. And not only that, but dog attack.
If you were testifying honestly and earnestly before and you're using doctor speak, why would you need to change it for today, for this report? Why not just continue to offer a natural, honest, thorough opinion that you had before? Why did you have to change it?
I came up with this. I became clearer and clearer every single time that I looked at the pictures, and I just realized that I understated the last time, that I misunderstood the question that was asked of me, you know, regarding my opinion, and so I felt that I had to be clearer.
Did anybody point out to you that it'd be more helpful to the defense case if you had a more assertive opinion?
No, absolutely not.
So when you went through these days and months since the trial, did you get any new information that made you realize you underscored the confidence in your opinion?
No.
Okay. Because in your earlier testimony, it's quite different.
I know.
I want to do this gently, but I want to go through some of that.
Okay.
Okay. When you first testified, you had, how should I say this? You offered opinions that were less than certain about the genesis and cause of the wounds, didn't you?
I think it sounded like I was not certain. However, I was certain. I just didn't express it correctly.
Okay. When you first testified in the voir dire about some of these wounds, you were asked what kind of animal you thought caused the wounds, and you said, most likely a dog.
Correct.
Right. You didn't say beyond a reasonable degree of dog bite certainty, did you?
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the basis of the
The
question?
objection is, he said beyond a reasonable doubt, and that was...
No, he didn't say doubt. He said degree of medical certainty.
He said beyond, Your Honor.
Right, beyond a reasonable degree of medical certainty. So I heard you didn't get to the certainty, you just heard beyond reasonable and objected. So based on that, the objection's overruled.
Let me phrase to make it clear. You didn't say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the bites you looked at were a dog.
I did in one of the okay, and maybe in the next one. Okay. But yeah, if I wasn't asked about reasonable degree of medical certainty, I may not have expressed it.
The court herself asked you, do you know what kind of animal? And you said, yes, most likely a dog.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So you didn't express certainty at that point?
Yes, but again, thinking as a doctor and not a lawyer or a judge or someone. I'm thinking as a doctor. I'm thinking that it's never 100%, and so that's what I was going by. If I was going to be teaching medical students what those wounds were, another group of wounds, I tell people never 100% in medicine. So that's where that came from, and I apologize if I confused the court.
I don't think there's any confusion. You use the word likely. The word possibly is even less certain than likely, isn't it?
I don't know.
Well, when you're a doctor and you look at something and you say, well, the likelihood is this is the cause of this.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That would be a stronger opinion than saying, it's possibly this.
Correct.
Possible is even less certain, isn't it? At trial, when you were asked about the cause of the injuries, I'm going to quote you, and I can show you if you'd like. It's the trial transcript, page 19, line 21. What you said is, I believe that these injuries were sustained by an animal, possibly a large dog, because of the patent injuries.
Yes.
Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Very different. I'll just finish if I could. Very different than what you're opining today at this hearing.
I'm sorry that you think it is, and I can understand how you believe it is, but it's not different to me. I believed it was a dog. I was convinced it was a dog then, but going by the no 100% in medicine, I didn't say that. I am still convinced it's a dog. The one thing that's a little different is that it's an attack. After counting the series of wounds and whatever, I am convinced not only was it a dog, striking once or twice, but it was actually multiple strikes by that dog.
Okay, now I want to get back to the testimony we were talking about, your testimony at trial, under oath, okay? Your testimony is you believe they were sustained by an animal, possibly a large dog. You expressed uncertainty that you didn't even know or have an opinion about what type of animal caused these wounds at that time. Is that fair to say?
I was leaving room for if there was for instance, another kind of animal in the vicinity that, but there's no evidence to that. There's no, paw marks or anything in the ground.
What other animal do you think was in the vicinity that would have caused these?
I don't know, but I was just leaving that. Again, being a trained physician, there's no absolutes, and so that's what.
No.
The way I approached it. I'm sorry if...
Did you inquire to see more discovery, to see if there was a pack of wild animals in 34 Fairview that would have caused this? Did you reach out to any of the witnesses or the lawyers and ask if there was any reports or information suggesting another animal?
I did not.
Were you curious?
I did not. I just didn't do it.
Okay. You were asked by Mr. Jackson, trial page 23, line 3. He provided the question, does this appear, as it's a pattern injury that you see, appear consistent with an animal or a large dog? And you said yes. So you included that this, again, could have been a dog or an animal in your opinion. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Mm-hmm. I haven't...
So I'm sorry, we can't take a, we need a yes or no.
Oh, sorry.
Doctor.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Again, at trial, page 23, line 6, you were asked, does the number of injuries that you see here relegated to just the right arm, is that consistent with an animal or a large dog? And you said, yes, it can be. Okay. Do you want to see your testimony? Because I don't want to just put words in your mouth.
No, I trust you.
And so, thank you. So the question that you were asked was positing that it could have been not just a dog, but any animal. And you were agreeable to that at that time.
Again, thinking like a medical doctor, not a participant in a legal setting.
Not to belabor, but these are your words, so I want... You were again asked, page 23, line 18, by Mr. Jackson, based on everything that we've discussed today, doctor, is it your opinion, based on a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that these injuries were from an animal attack possibly a large dog, and you said yes. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so your opinions today that this was exclusively an animal attack caused by a large dog, that is much different in kind than the uncertainty and possibility that you admitted under oath during trial, in this case, the first time, or actually the second time you testified about it. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
It sounds like it, yes.
Okay. I think this is a good point to stop because we need to get another date. You're not going to finish in 3 minutes, right? No, okay. All right. So, Mr. McDermott, was the date you and I looked at? Was it Jim? Okay. The witness can step down, but Timmy, she's going to stay in the courtroom regarding the date. Yes.
January 6th.
Okay.
January 6th. Doc there.
Oh, yeah.
Doctor, are you available on January 6th?
I'd be available.
I think after January 15th is cutting it a little too close.
Could do earlier. That's far out.
So, I mean, the best date for the court is January 6th?
No dates in December, Your Honor?
Will be available.
Tomorrow. Actually, I don't know that we'd be able to do it. We suspended a jury trial today that we told the jurors they'd have tomorrow, and we still have testimony. So I think at best we'd give you a half an hour, and I don't think that does you any good. So,
Commonwealth will be available anytime.
Monday we can't do?
no. No, not any time before. I could do the 30th.
Oh, I can't do the 30th. No.
So what we really need is Mr. Alessi.
Your Honor, what is your question for a date? And I'll give
We're
you
now
my...
January
30th. We're looking at the 30th now.
or the 6th, Jim, right?
I thought the.
Yeah. Doctor said after the 15th.
Can you do January 6th?
Can I?
Yes.
I wasn't going to be in town.
Can I ask this? Is the 30th an available date for the court?
Can we move our other stuff, Jimmy?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Back to January 6th?
I can do January 6th. But I want to be I'm trying to be respectful of the witness.
I'm trying to do that as well, but the witness's best dates after the 30th are after the 15th of January, and that's too late. So I understand that the conflict seems to be Mr. Jackson, but Mr. Yannetti, are you available on the 30th or the 6th?
I could move things to be available on the 6th. There's no chance we could do the 8th, right?
I could do the 8th, Your Honor.
You do the 8th?
Jimmy, that's a full day, right?
The 8th?
I think it doesn't matter to her.
Jim.
Yes.
I have stuff.
Actually, I could do the 7th, the 8th. I could probably do the 9th. I just have to move something, but I could do the 9th. I just can't do the 6th.
Where are we up to now, the 8th? Back to the,
That
up
would
to
be
the
the
8th
best
now?
for us if we could do
The 8th in the morning?
Anytime.
All day.
So I have a conflict here in the afternoon. So I have something that we have to do in the afternoon on that Wednesday. Wednesday the 8th. But if we can do it in the morning, we'll do it in the morning.
We could all do it at 9 o'clock. I would imagine, I guess I would defer to Mr. Brennan if he can finish in the morning. 8:30.
I don't want to limit, I let Mr. Alessi go on much longer than the estimate, and I had no problem doing so, Mr. Alessi.
Okay.
You can't do the 6th or 7th?
I could do the 7th, Your Honor. I cannot do the 6th.
So, Mr. Alessi, you're available all the dates we said, pretty much, right?
I will make myself available for all of the dates. I'm not presently, but
I would like to see Counsel at sidebar.